Well, now it is officially spread to Southeast Florida.
As if the story of single-family home investment wasn't complicated enough,
on top of much more aggressive rate cuts.
For the past 3 years, something unbelievable has unfolded across the United States. Rent didn't just rise, it skyrocketed at a pace no one had ever witnessed in modern times. From Florida to Los Angeles, landlords held all the cards. They jacked up prices by hundreds of dollars in a single night. Confident tenants would accept anything just to avoid being pushed out on the street. But everything has flipped. In 2025, that once untouchable power is crumbling. Cities that were drowning in bidding wars are now drowning in vacant units. We're talking steep, double-digit price drops.
Data from Zillow shows the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment here in Austin is currently coming in at $1,300 a month.
Record high empty apartments.
Many different things, trying to get their kids to school, trying to get themselves to their jobs, trying to buy their groceries.
And landlords scrambling in ways we haven't seen in more than a decade. Free months of rent, upfront bonuses, complimentary parking, zero deposits. They're practically begging people to sign a lease. Developers overbuilt, investors over-leveraged, and the renters they squeezed for years, they've finally reached their limit. In some major metros, prices are falling so fast, it's rewriting the entire rental map. And this isn't some temporary glitch. This is a real structural reset. After years of landlords dominating the market, incentives are roaring back. And the leverage is shifting back to the people who actually live in these cities. If you think this is just a momentary dip, stay with me, because what's happening right now could permanently reshape how renting works in America. This is the kind of shift no one wants to acknowledge until it's already changed everything. So let's get into it. Today, we're counting down the top 10 U.S. cities where rents are crashing and landlords are in full-blown panic mode. And if you want more deep dives into the biggest economic transformations happening across the country, make sure you subscribe, because we're only getting warmed up. Number 10. Austin, Texas. We have to kick this list off with Austin, a city whose rise felt unstoppable and whose crash might be one of the most dramatic of the decade. From 2020 to 2023, Austin wasn't just booming, it was the place everyone wanted to be. It became the glittering trophy of the tech world, the hotspot, the migration magnet. Remote workers fled big coastal cities and poured into Central Texas by the thousands. Venture capital money rushed in nonstop. Startups were taking over entire blocks. For a moment, Austin really did look like the next Silicon Valley successor. Cranes dominated the skyline. Glass towers shot up at lightning speed. Luxury rentals filled the downtown core so fast, it felt like they were printing tenants out of thin air. Landlords raised rents at will, and no one blinked, because demand was outrageous. Everyone thought the party would last forever. But the heat wave didn't just cool off, it snapped. In 2025, average rent in Austin is down 14% compared to last year, the sharpest drop in the entire Sunbelt region. Buildings that once had wait lists stretching months now have rows of empty units. Those rooftop lounges, infinity pools, and glossy co-working spaces sitting untouched, gathering dust instead of Instagram posts. The same developers who once bragged about being sold out are now scrambling to fill rooms. And they're not subtle about it. We're seeing 3 months of free rent, 0 deposit move-ins, perks, gifts, even event tickets. Anything to get a lease signed. So what caused this sudden reversal? One answer, the tech crash. Mass layoffs at Meta, Oracle, Tesla, giants that practically anchored Austin's boom. Thousands of high-salary renters vanished almost overnight. Those individuals paying over $2,000 a month for tiny luxury units, most left, downsized, or stopped tolerating inflated prices. High-profile towers like the Independent and 70 Rainey, symbols of Austin's rental frenzy, are now reporting vacancy levels they haven't seen in a decade. Over in East Austin, the so-called creative hub, landlords are slashing, asking prices because the competition is brutal, and investors who jumped in at the peak, they're in trouble. Many locked themselves into massive loans with high interest rates, assuming rents would rise forever. Now, values are sinking, debts are piling up, and the math simply doesn't work anymore. but for renters. This is the first real shift in their favor in years. The city that became impossible to afford is finally breaking, and that matters a lot. Austin's 2025 reality is undeniable. The fastest climber in America is now one of the fastest to fall. And when Austin stumbles, the entire Sun Belt feels the tremors. Number 9, Miami, Florida. Now we head to Miami, a market whose rental boom wasn't just huge, it was blindingly intense. Think back to those pandemic years. Remote jobs exploded, crypto fortunes were everywhere, and wealthy investors from around the world flocked to South Florida chasing prestige, palm trees, and profit. Miami transformed into a billionaire sandbox. Every new tower, every luxury project, every flashy listing felt like a guaranteed payday. From 2020 to 2022, rents didn't simply rise, they detonated. We're talking more than 60% growth. 60%. That's not appreciation, that's liftoff. Lifelong residents were priced out overnight. Young workers couldn't even dream of affording the city anymore. But for landlords and speculators, it felt like a festival with no end in sight. Downtown high-rises flexed ocean panoramas, sky lounges, infinity pools, designer interiors, and rents that stunned people. $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom became the new normal, and people paid it because Miami looked unstoppable, because everyone believed the rise was permanent. But by 2025, that shine has worn off, and the unraveling is impossible to ignore. Average rent has plunged about 11% in a single year. Vacancies are spiking in Brickell, downtown, and along the waterfront. Those glamorous towers that once had people fighting for a spot are now dangling freebies, complimentary parking, no deposits, gift cards, anything to fill units. And the issue isn't just shrinking demand. The costs crushing landlords are absolutely brutal. Insurance premiums tripled. A building that once needed $500 a month for coverage suddenly needs $1,500. That difference slashes profits instantly. HOA fees sky high. In the wake of Florida's post-collapse safety overhaul, buildings were hit with mandatory repairs and special assessments. Surprise, multi-$1,000 bills that blindsided owners. The fallout has been devastating. Thousands of investors are losing money every month. Some have already walked away. Condos that commanded $900,000 in 2022 are now going for $700,000, or just sitting unsold, collecting dust. Airbnb hosts who dominated the vacation market are retreating completely as tourism softens. Cleaning and maintenance eat profits, and the business model collapses. Even foreign money, the backbone of Miami real estate for decades, is pulling back. Storm risk is too high, assessment fees are endless, and investors are quietly shifting their cash elsewhere. From above, Miami still looks like perfection. Turquoise water, a glittering skyline, a postcard come to life. But underneath that beauty, the financial foundation is cracking apart. Miami, once the poster child for limitless demand, is now the clearest warning sign in the country. When the luxury machine grows faster than basic logic, even paradise can break. Number 8. Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta was supposed to be the exception. On paper, the city had everything going for it. A booming job market, relatively inexpensive housing, and a massive wave of new residents fleeing high-cost cities on both coasts. People looked at Atlanta and said, "This is the reliable play. This is the city where growth actually makes sense." Developers bought into that dream too. They rushed in and dumped billions into sprawling apartment projects stretching from Midtown to Sandy Springs. From 2021 through 2024, over 50,000 new rental units were built. 50,000 in one metro area. That's an enormous amount of new inventory. But here's the question no one bothered to ask. Could Atlanta realistically handle that much supply, that fast? Spoiler, it couldn't. By 2025, the boom has flipped into a full-on downturn. Rents are down nearly 9% from last year. Vacancy rates are rising far faster than analysts predicted. Towers that used to lease entire floors in a week now have units sitting untouched for months. Landlords are sounding the alarm. They're offering 3 months of free rent, complimentary parking, zero deposit move-ins, Some are even throwing in upgraded appliances or waiving every fee on the application just to get someone to sign their name. But the real issue runs far deeper than oversupply. Wages in Atlanta have completely stalled. People aren't making more money, but everything else has gotten pricier. Inflation has eaten into paychecks like a slow-moving fire. Rent that used to take up 30% of someone's income suddenly eats 40, 50, sometimes even more. Student loan payments kicked back in. That hit younger renters hard. Millennials and Gen Z are doubling up.
So that people who want to purchase, especially for millennials and Gen Z, their first homes can have assets and upward mobility, which housing typically provides.
Moving back home or simply packing their bags and leaving the metro. Because why fight to stay in an expensive city if your paycheck can't keep up? Even the suburbs, long considered the safe, affordable escape, are weakening. Areas like Cobb County, Gwinnett, and Henry County are seeing single-family rentals sit empty. Investors are slashing rents just to plug the financial hole. For years, Atlanta carried the reputation as the Sun Belt's affordable success story, the place where you could build your life without going broke. It was a compelling narrative. The problem? It was built on an assumption that didn't hold up. The belief was that demand would always stay ahead of supply, that people would keep pouring into the city, that wages would eventually rise enough to justify the higher costs. But none of that materialized. Developers built luxury instead of realistic housing. Landlords expected renters to stretch endlessly. And when those expectations collapsed, so did the city's momentum. In 2025, even the Sun Belt's safest market has been pulled into the chaos. And for Atlanta, the road to recovery is going to be longer and steeper than anyone predicted. Number 7. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always lived by the gamble. But right now, the house isn't winning. Landlords are the ones taking the hit, and the losses are stacking fast. For years, Vegas looked untouchable. Waves of new residents streamed in from California, chasing cheaper living and a fresh start. Investors grabbed properties like chips on a poker table. Short-term rentals multiplied across the valley, and nearly everyone believed the momentum would go on forever. On paper, the story checked out. The economy looked solid. Tourism started bouncing back. Jobs were plentiful. The optimism felt justified, but the streak didn't last. By 2025, rents have fallen almost 10% from their 2023 peak. Vacancy rates have doubled. Large apartment communities in Henderson and Summerlin now have rows of empty units. The Strip still glows at night, but behind the neon shine is a reality most people aren't talking about. The market is drowning in oversupply. Tourism, the heartbeat of Las Vegas, still hasn't fully returned to pre-pandemic strength. Convention traffic is smaller. Casino hiring has slowed. Tip money is weaker. The service workers who hold the city together are feeling the squeeze. And then came another blow, the Airbnb crash. Thousands of vacation rentals that once catered to weekend partygoers can't fill their calendars anymore. Owners panicked and dumped those units into the long-term rental pool. Overnight, they became direct competitors to traditional landlords, pushing rents down even harder. Homes that once pulled in $2,400 a month now sit untouched at $1,900, with zero interest. People who bought during the feverish pandemic price surge are cutting rents to stop their finances from collapsing. Some investors have already had enough and are selling at losses just to get out before things get worse. And the wildest twist? Construction hasn't slowed. Developers are finishing luxury projects launched during the height of Vegas optimism, adding thousands more high-end units to a market that clearly doesn't need them. Las Vegas in 2025 carries a strange déjà vu. It feels like a rerun of 2008, a different era, but the same pattern. Overconfidence, overbuilding, speculation outrunning reality, empty buildings, nervous investors, landlords bleeding cash month after month. The lights are still bright, the casinos still beckon, but behind the show, the city built on odds is learning what happens when the luck runs out. Number 6. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, once the fiery center of the Sun Belt surge, is cooling off far faster than anyone predicted. Not long ago, this city was the star of America's migration narrative. Families from California, the Midwest, and nearly every corner of the country poured into the valley as if they were chasing hidden treasure. Builders couldn't keep pace. Entire neighborhoods in Chandler, Glendale, and Mesa seemed to appear overnight, sprouting like desert flowers after a rare rain. Phoenix was the boom everyone talked about, but in 2025, that heat wave has shifted into something far less optimistic. Over 30,000 new apartments hit the market in a single year, 30,000 units flooding in at once, and demand simply can't keep up. Average rent has dropped by nearly 12%. Landlords are resorting to every incentive imaginable: free months of rent, fully furnished units, prepaid utilities, move-in bonuses, anything to nudge occupancy numbers upward. Complexes that once bragged about waiting lists are now posting desperate pleas for tenants. Listings have changed their language entirely. Gone are the premium luxury labels, replaced with limited-time specials and deep discounts. The skyline is still littered with cranes, but behind the construction frenzy, many of these projects are barely staying afloat. Insurance costs have surged. Maintenance expenses are rising. Investors who bought high-end properties during the pandemic peak, when prices were borderline absurd, are now trapped underwater, owing more on their loans than their buildings are worth. And it's not only renters feeling pressure. Phoenix's job market is tightening. High interest rates have slammed the brakes on corporate expansion. The once unstoppable migration pipeline has slowed dramatically. The steady stream of new arrivals, the very engine that powered Phoenix's rise, is now reduced to a trickle, meaning there simply aren't enough people to fill this avalanche of new supply. From downtown high-rises to the furthest edges of the East Valley, the same pattern repeats: landlords discovering that unchecked growth never ends with a soft landing. It ends with a correction. By 2025, Phoenix isn't just cooling, it's recalibrating. A city built on the assumption of relentless expansion is now confronting the truth that it grew too big, too quickly, and the consequences are only beginning to unfold. Number 5. Dallas. Texas Dallas spent years looking untouchable. Corporate giants kept moving in. Young professionals packed into Uptown's luxury apartments. The suburbs stretched endlessly outward. Investors proudly labeled Dallas the economic powerhouse of Texas. The narrative was so strong that no one questioned it. Growth felt guaranteed, permanent, automatic. But in 2025, that certainty has finally cracked wide open. Rents in Uptown, Plano, and Frisco have fallen by around 10%. Class A buildings are seeing vacancy numbers they haven't experienced in more than 10 years. The skyline may still shine like a jewel across North Texas, but behind those glass walls, landlords are getting nervous. The reason? The numbers simply no longer add up. Developers built far more than demand could support. From 2021 through 2024, Dallas saw tens of thousands of new apartments come online. Tens of thousands. Right as renters started cutting back their spending, inflation devoured disposable income. Interest rates stayed brutally high. Potential tenants are moving in with family, splitting rent with roommates, and skipping expensive one-bedrooms that once leased without effort. The era of young professionals living solo in luxury units is fading fast. Landlords are reacting with urgency. Free utilities, complimentary parking, rent credits, anything to get leases signed. Investors who expected reliable cash flow are instead sinking into losses. Insurance costs are rising. Property taxes keep climbing. Those projected returns that looked amazing on paper are evaporating. Dallas, once the poster child for boundless economic momentum, is now stuck in a dangerous cycle. Too many high-end units, and not enough renters who can realistically pay for them. Even the city's corporate muscle isn't saving the day this time. Tech and finance firms are freezing hiring. The steady wave of workers that used to follow corporate relocations has slowed to a trickle. Meanwhile, longtime locals, the people who actually shaped Dallas, are being priced out of neighborhoods they helped bring to life. They simply can't afford the numbers developers thought the market would sustain. Dallas still glows beautifully from a distance. That iconic skyline lighting up the night is as breathtaking as ever. But on the ground, the narrative is changing fast. The city that once symbolized unstoppable expansion is learning a tough truth. Even in Texas, the boom can run out of fuel. Number 4. Boise, Idaho. Boise was the pandemic's unexpected superstar. The Cinderella story everyone couldn't stop talking about. A quiet mountain city that suddenly transformed into America's unlikely housing phenomenon. When lockdowns hit and remote work became the norm, Boise stepped into the spotlight as if it had been preparing for this moment. Californians fled the Bay Area with all-cash offers. Tech workers from Seattle rolled in with gigantic salaries. New Yorkers craving fresh air and space packed up and headed west. Home prices almost doubled in what felt like a blink. Rents shot upward. Ordinary apartments sparked bidding wars. Developers scrambled, convinced demand would stretch on forever. Everyone wanted their piece of Boise's miracle rise. For a moment, it seemed like nothing could slow it down. But by 2025, the shine has completely worn off, and the crash is unfolding in a way that feels almost harsh. Rents have plunged 13% in a year, the biggest drop anywhere in the Mountain West. Vacancies are rising far faster than analysts projected. Downtown apartments that once disappeared from the market in hours now sit untouched for months. The developers who rush to build upscale luxury units by the hundreds are drowning in empty inventory. They're desperate for tenants who can actually afford what they created. And here's the core issue. Boise's real workforce, teachers, nurses, retail workers, service staff, never earned Silicon Valley money. They watched rents jump from $1,200 to $1,800 to over $2,200. They watched out-of-state arrivals outbid them at every turn. They were slowly pushed aside. Then the remote work boom faded. The Californians moved back. Tech workers returned to their hubs. And suddenly, Boise was left with an avalanche of expensive housing, with no local renters able to fill it. Even the surrounding cities, Meridian, Nampa, Eagle, are struggling. These were supposed to be the affordable escape from Boise's growth. Now they're facing stalled construction sites, unfinished projects, and materials sitting untouched as builders pull the brakes. Investors who imagined endless returns are selling off properties at painful losses. Small businesses that thrived on the influx of newcomers are shrinking too. Cafes, breweries, boutiques, all scaling back hours or shutting their doors as foot traffic dries up. Landlords are cutting rents by $300, $400, even $500. They're tossing out free months, free upgrades, anything they can think of. Yet units still linger. The urgency to move to Boise is gone. The once rising skyline feels frozen mid-story. Boise's rise and fall is both poetic and sobering. The city that once symbolized escape from urban chaos is now the reminder of what happens when the escape ends and reality comes storming back in. Number 3. Seattle, Washington. For the first time in more than 10 years, Seattle's skyline carries a feeling it hasn't known in a long time. Doubt. After an era defined by relentless expansion, rents climbing nonstop, cranes dominating the horizon, and tech wealth pushing the city higher and higher, 2025 has delivered something Seattle never thought it would face. A reality check. Rents have fallen by roughly 10%. Towers that once embodied success now echo with empty hallways. Massive layoffs across Amazon, Microsoft, and countless startups have hollowed out the very group of renters who kept Seattle's luxury market thriving. Downtown high-rises that once had waitlists stretching months are now dangling cash incentives and free rent, hoping to lure just a fraction of their former demand. In places like Capitol Hill, South Lake Union, and Belltown, high-end complexes are advertising price cuts that would have sounded impossible just a short time ago. And the suburbs aren't immune. Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, the story repeats itself. Renewal rates are collapsing. Tenants are packing up. Developers who assumed growth was infinite are suddenly overwhelmed by vacant units. Entire construction projects have been paused, delayed, or outright abandoned. Half-finished buildings dot the skyline like monuments to misplaced optimism. Cranes that once built non-stop now sit frozen against the gray sky. But the deeper shift goes far beyond economics. It's cultural. The pandemic rewired how people think about work and lifestyle. Many who once chased Seattle's prestige, the hustle, the salaries, the tech halo, are choosing different priorities now. Smaller, quieter cities. Lower costs, better balance, less pressure. The outflow isn't dramatic, but it's steady. Each household that leaves chips away at stability. Each renter who decides Seattle isn't worth the premium sends a new signal. The fundamentals have changed. The power dynamic has flipped entirely. Landlords who once dictated every term are now the ones bending. Renters are negotiating again, pushing for lower prices, shorter leases, more flexibility. And they can because vacancies give them leverage Seattle hasn't seen in years. The glass towers that were meant to showcase innovation now sit partially empty, reflecting the low clouds drifting over a city facing an uncertain chapter. In 2025, Seattle still shines through the mist. The beauty is still there. But just beneath that shimmer is a fragile truth. Cracks not formed by earthquakes, but by the tremors of a tech-driven economy discovering its limits. Number 2, San Francisco, California. If any American city embodies the word collapse, it's San Francisco. Once the crown jewel of tech, wealth, and innovation, the city has unraveled in a way few imagined possible. And the downward spiral is moving faster than even the harshest critics predicted. Rents have fallen by around 15% in a year. 15%. For San Francisco, that's the equivalent of watching a skyscraper crumble floor by floor. Downtown vacancy rates have shattered every record. Luxury high-rises that once charged $4,000 for a tiny one-bedroom now sit empty at $3,000, with incentives, and they still can't fill the units. The great tech exodus never reversed. Remote work didn't fade out. It became a lifestyle. Downtown, once buzzing with startups, innovators, and people chasing the next big idea, has transformed into a silent corridor of mirrored glass. Entire stretches of the city look hollowed out. For lease signs hang in rows like permanent fixtures. Red signs, blue signs, all telling the same story. Demand evaporated. Landlords who once boasted about passive income and early retirement are now pleading for renters. Even after major price cuts, apartments remain vacant. At the same time, expenses have detonated. Property taxes climbed. Maintenance costs doubled. Insurance keeps rising. The profits landlords relied on have flipped into losses that dig deeper every month. Investors who bought at peak prices, convinced San Francisco real estate was the safest bet in the nation, are stuck. They can't refinance without drowning. They can't sell without losing a fortune. They're paralyzed, watching their balance sheets bleed out. But beyond the financial wreckage lies something far more damaging: perception. Once a city loses its story, its identity, its why, everything else follows. Concerns about crime are widespread. Homelessness is visible on nearly every block. Basic quality of life has declined sharply. These aren't just statistics. They're the emotional catalysts behind every U-Haul leaving the Bay. People are choosing different paths. Sacramento suddenly looks appealing. Austin looks appealing. Nashville looks appealing. Places where people can breathe, save money, and feel stable. Things San Francisco stopped offering. Restaurants, indie shops, and local institutions that once gave the city its heartbeat are disappearing. Neighborhoods feel drained of the charm that made them iconic. Even the city's legendary tech identity is fading. Companies are abandoning their headquarters for cheaper, calmer cities where profitability isn't eaten alive by costs. The irony is chilling. The place that set the highest housing prices in the nation is now showing just how far and how fast a market can fall. San Francisco's downturn isn't a blip. It's not a temporary dip waiting for a rebound. It's a transformation, a cautionary tale etched into steel and concrete about what happens when innovation outruns sustainability. when greed outruns balance, and when a city forgets the people who made it great. Number 1, New York City. And taking the top spot is the empire that's finally beginning to reveal its fractures. For decades, New York's rental market was considered unshakable, untouchable. No matter the recession, the crisis, the setback, demand always surged back. The belief was practically doctrine. There's New York, and then there's everywhere else. But in 2025, that illusion is dissolving, and it's unfolding right before our eyes. Average rents in Manhattan have dropped roughly 12%. Brooklyn and Queens, as much as 15%. For the first time in a generation, renters hold the power. Landlords are on defense. Incentives that vanished years ago are suddenly everywhere again. Months of free rent, zero deposit move-ins, luxury upgrades handed out just to spark interest from prospective tenants. Developers overplayed their hand from 2021 to 2023. They built as if the river of wealth flowing into the city would never slow down. Instead, those shiny towers now stand above half-empty blocks. Major layoffs in finance, media, and tech have gutted the renter pool that made New York's resilience legendary. When Goldman Sachs cuts thousands of jobs, that's not just a headline. It's thousands of high-earning renters gone overnight. International buyers, Manhattan's quiet engine for decades, have stepped back too. Global instability made them cautious. Local tax hikes made the profits questionable. Why park money in New York when emerging markets promise more growth? Even the ultra-rich are pulling back. Units along Billionaires' Row, apartments that once sold at jaw-dropping prices, are being marked down by staggering amounts. Mid-tier property owners are being crushed by brutal refinancing rates that wipe out their cash flow. And smaller landlords, the families who own one brownstone or a couple of walk-ups, are facing the harshest reality. Whispered conversations about foreclosure are starting. These aren't hedge funds. These are everyday people who believed real estate would guarantee stability. Now that stability looks like a loan from a future that never arrived. Meanwhile, young professionals, the lifeblood of Manhattan's energy, are heading to places like Charlotte, Nashville, and Philadelphia. They're asking a devastatingly simple question. Why pay $4,000 for a cramped one-bedroom in Manhattan when I can live twice as well somewhere else for a fraction of the cost? The culture, the pulse, the chaos. It still exists in New York. The magic hasn't evaporated, but fewer people can shoulder the price of admission. New York's downturn isn't a cliff dive. It's a controlled retreat. A slow, steady realization that the city finally hit its limit. And for the first time, even lifelong New Yorkers are quietly acknowledging the unthinkable. The reign of runaway rent may have reached its end. The skyline still glitters. The towers still stretch toward the clouds. The lights still dance across the river. But beneath that breathtaking view lies a new story, one where ambition meets fatigue. The market adjusts, and even the greatest city on earth faces consequences that once seemed impossible. And for a brief moment, the city that never sleeps pauses, just long enough to catch its breath. The bigger picture. Across the United States right now, something subtle but monumental is unfolding. For the first time in more than 10 years, the power dynamic is flipping. Renters are finally getting the upper hand. The age of cutthroat bidding wars, frantic applications, and brutal rent spikes is fading. In its place, vacant units, sliding prices, and landlords hustling to offer perks just to stay competitive. But this moment is bigger than a dip in pricing. It's more than a routine cycle. It's a cultural turning point. Millions of Americans are questioning whether renting makes sense at all, whether buying a home is worth the wait, or whether the old idea of stability even exists anymore. Developers built polished luxury. Renters wanted practical comfort. Investors chased maximum returns. Families simply needed something secure. Those realities never truly aligned. The market built for profit rarely matched the market built for people. Now, the correction has arrived. Some cities will adapt. They'll rethink strategy, prioritize affordability, and create housing that fits real lives instead of spreadsheets. Others won't. they'll shrink. They'll lose resonance, momentum, and relevance. They'll become the cautionary tales policymakers quietly whisper about. But no matter the city, the principle is identical. Housing markets don't escape gravity forever. They can't operate in a vacuum where basic economics stop applying. At some point, supply overwhelms demand. At some point, renters hit the limit of what they can pay. Eventually, the music stops, and not everyone finds a seat. The real question now is simple. Will the cities we covered today actually learn from this moment? Will they build smarter, plan smarter, and finally recognize the importance of housing regular people can afford? Or will they repeat the same failed blueprint once prices stabilize? That decision, that fork in the road, is where the true story lies. Not in the empty buildings or the plunging rents, but in what leaders choose to do next. You've just watched a deep dive into the unraveling of America's rental market. If this breakdown shifted your perspective, if it made you look differently at your own rent, your city, or your next move, then you already know what comes next. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, share this video, because what's happening right now is just the opening chapter of a far bigger transformation. The numbers are speaking, and the story they're telling is far from over.